Have you ever been with a guy who suddenly pulls away and you're left wondering, did I do something wrong? Did he lose interest? What if I told you that sometimes his distance is the biggest clue that you're actually living rent-free in his head? Because today I'm going to show you 9 subtle signs that even when he acts cold, you've already got him hooked, and you may not even realize the power you hold. Think about this. Men aren't taught to handle emotions the way women are, so when he feels drawn to you in a way he can't explain, often his instinct isn't to lean in, it's to back up. Why? Because closeness makes him vulnerable. But here's the twist. His actions, his little slip-ups, they reveal the truth. And if you know what to look for, you'll see that his silence or his distance doesn't mean indifference. It means he's hooked, and he doesn't know how to hide it. Men acting distant often confuses women because the natural thought is that distance equals disinterest. But the truth is, many times it's the exact opposite. A man may start to pull away, not because he doesn't care, but because he cares more than he expected to. When he finds himself thinking about you too much, when you've gotten under his skin in a way he didn't plan for, it creates emotions he isn't ready to deal with. For a lot of men, the safest response to those overwhelming feelings is to retreat. It's not rejection, it's self-protection. He needs space to process what's going on inside of him, because closeness stirs up vulnerability, and vulnerability isn't always something men have been taught to feel safe with. Imagine he's used to being in control of his world, his routine, his emotions. Then you come into the picture and suddenly he's distracted at work, replaying conversations in his head, noticing the way you smiled or the way you said his name. He realizes he's more invested than he planned, and that realization makes him nervous. Instead of leaning forward, he leans back. He becomes less responsive, slower to reply, maybe even a little cold. But that reaction is not the same as losing interest. It's his way of managing a feeling he can't control. What often happens in this phase is that he creates a push-pull dynamic without even intending to. One day he's affectionate, the next he withdraws. That inconsistency isn't because he's confused about you, it's because he's conflicted within himself. On one hand, he feels a strong pull towards you, and on the other, he's scared of what that pull means. If he gives into it, he risks being vulnerable, and vulnerability means the possibility of rejection, of losing his balance, of caring more than you do. That fear is what drives the distance. So, when a man acts distant, it's not always a sign that you should walk away. Sometimes it's proof that he's actually hooked, that you've struck a nerve he wasn't prepared for. His silence, his retreat, his hesitations, they're all signals of someone who is carrying feelings he's still trying to make sense of. It's not about lack of attraction, it's about the intensity of it and his need to feel safe before he allows himself to step closer again. A man who is hooked, even when he tries to act distant, will almost always leave behind little traces that he's still connected to you. He might stop texting as often or pretend to be busy, but behind the scenes, he's still orbiting your world. One of the clearest signs of this is how he stays linked through subtle ways, the kind you might not even notice at first. He'll check your social media, not just once, but consistently. He wants to see what you're posting, who you're with, how you're spending your time. Maybe he doesn't always like or comment, but his presence is there in the background quietly watching. For him, this is a way to stay close without having to admit how much he actually cares. Another sign is that he asks about you through other people. You might hear from a mutual friend that he brought up your name in conversation, or that he wanted to know how you're doing. When a man is hooked, curiosity takes over. Even if he isn't directly reaching out, he can't stop himself from looking for updates, because staying in the loop gives him reassurance. It shows that despite his distance, you're still on his mind more often than he probably wants to admit. Sometimes his way of staying connected is more subtle. He might remember small details you mentioned in passing and bring them up later. He could reference your favorite drink or recall a story you shared weeks ago. That level of of attention doesn't come from someone indifferent. It comes from someone who is mentally replaying his moments with you and holding on to pieces of you in his thoughts. His distance on the surface may trick you into thinking he's detached, but his memory betrays him. What makes this behavior so important to recognize is that it reveals intention. A man who isn't interested won't bother keeping tabs on you. He won't care enough to notice the details or check in on your world. But a man who is hooked, even if he's battling with his feelings, can't fully cut himself off. He wants to know what you're up to, who has your attention, and whether he still holds a place in your life. His distance is his way of keeping control, but the quiet ways he stays connected show that you've already gotten into his head. When a man is hooked but acts distant, one of the most revealing signs is that even though he avoids deep emotional conversations, he still shows up when it matters. This can feel confusing because you might notice he's not always expressive about his feelings. He might avoid talking about the relationship or where things are going, and at times he might seem hard to reach. But the moment something important happens in your life, he suddenly makes himself present. If you're going through a challenge, he'll be there to support you. If you achieve something, he'll make sure to acknowledge it. That shift tells you his care runs deeper than what he openly admits. This kind of behavior often happens because vulnerability is uncomfortable for him. Sitting down and saying, "I care about you, I think about you, I need you," might feel too raw. For many men, that level of openness feels risky, as though putting words to those emotions makes them lose control. So instead of telling you directly, he demonstrates it in action. He'll help when you least expect it, step in when you're struggling, or make time for you even when his life is busy. It's his indirect way of saying, "You matter to me." It might look like he's holding back in conversations, but watch what he does. A man who doesn't care will keep his distance in every sense. He won't be emotionally available, and he won't be physically dependable. A man who's hooked, even while acting cold, won't allow himself to stay completely detached. He can't. His instincts to protect, support, and be present take over because deep down he feels invested. Sometimes his actions are subtle, like checking to make sure you got home safe, or remembering something important you mentioned and following up on it. Other times they're bigger, like showing up to encourage you before a big event, or being there when you're going through a difficult situation. He might not say the words you want to hear, but his presence speaks for him. So when a man seems distant yet consistently shows up when it really counts, it's a powerful clue. It means he hasn't detached at all. In fact, it often means he's battling with his emotions, holding back in words but letting his actions slip through. His way of showing up reveals that no matter how distant he acts, you're still on his mind and in his heart. Mixed signals are one of the most frustrating things to experience when dealing with a man who seems distant yet clearly isn't indifferent. One moment he's attentive, affectionate, maybe even making you feel like you're the center of his world, and the next he pulls back, goes quiet, or acts like he's less invested. It can feel like emotional whiplash, leaving you questioning whether he's serious about you or simply playing games. But here's the truth. When a man is hooked, those mixed signals often aren't intentional manipulation. They're usually a defense mechanism, a way of protecting himself from the intensity of what he feels. Men aren't always taught how to manage emotions like longing, attachment, or vulnerability. For some, those feelings feel almost dangerous because they create the risk of getting hurt. So instead of leaning fully into what he feels, he creates distance to regain his sense of control. That's why he can be warm one day and withdrawn the next. The inconsistency isn't necessarily about you, it's about him struggling to balance his attraction and his fear. The closeness excites him, but it also scares him, and so he creates this back and forth behavior without even realizing it. What often happens is that he wants the connection but fears the consequences of giving too much of himself. He may think, what if I fall too hard and she doesn't feel the same? What if I show too much and lose my edge? What if I get hurt? Those questions fuel his push-pull behavior. His way of protecting himself is to step back just as he starts to feel vulnerable. He convinces himself that by acting distant, he's in control. But in reality, the inconsistency only proves that he cares more than he can admit. If a man truly had no interest, there wouldn't be any mixed signals at all. His behavior would be consistently cold, consistently absent, and you wouldn't be left wondering where you stand. But when his actions swing between closeness and distance, it's a sign of internal conflict. He's hooked, but he's fighting his own emotions. That tug of war creates confusion, but it's also one of the clearest indicators that you're in his head far more than he's willing to say. His mixed signals don't mean he's not into you. They mean he's overwhelmed by just how much he is. When a man is hooked but acting distant, one of the biggest giveaways is inconsistency. You'll notice his energy isn't steady. One day he's warm, texting often, engaging deeply, maybe even making you feel like you're all he thinks about. The next day he seems distracted, slow to reply, or almost indifferent. This inconsistency can be confusing, but it usually comes from his inner conflict, not from a lack of attraction. When you're in his head, he's battling between two sides of himself. The side that wants to lean in because he feels drawn to you, and the side that pulls back because closeness makes him feel vulnerable. This hot and cold behavior often shows up in subtle ways. He might plan a date with you, shower you with attention during that time, and make you feel deeply connected, only to pull away the next few days, leaving you wondering what changed. That sudden shift doesn't mean his feelings disappeared. It means the intensity scared him. For many men, emotional closeness triggers a need to retreat and regain control. When he realizes how much power you have to affect his mood or his sense of balance, he instinctively pulls back to protect himself. At the core, this inconsistency is about fear. Fear of rejection, fear of losing independence, fear of caring more than you do. A man who isn't hooked won't show this kind of push-pull dynamic. If he's indifferent, he'll be consistent in his distance. He won't come close enough to confuse you because he simply won't feel that emotional pull. But a man who is genuinely drawn to you can't help himself. He swings between closeness and distance because he hasn't figured out how to manage the strength of his feelings. It's important to recognize this for what it is, not a sign that he doesn't care, but proof that he cares more than he expected to. His inconsistency is an emotional battle, not a reflection of your worth. When you see this hot and cold pattern, it's not about you doing something wrong. It's about him trying to reconcile how much he wants you with how vulnerable that makes him feel. That inner struggle is exactly what reveals that you're not just a passing thought in his mind. You've become someone he can't ignore, even when he tries to act distant. When a man is hooked, one of the clearest signs is hidden in his body language. Even when his words or actions suggest distance, his physical presence often betrays what he truly feels. A man can control what he says, he can limit his messages, and he can pretend to be detached, but the body doesn't lie. When he's around you, pay close attention to how he carries himself. If he lingers in eye contact longer than usual, if his gaze finds you even in a crowded room, or if he positions himself closer to you without realizing it, these are unconscious signals that you're constantly on his mind. Sometimes it's as small as the way he leans in when you talk, as though he can't help but close the space between you. Other times it's the subtle mirroring, copying your gestures, matching your tone, or adjusting his pace to walk in sync with you. These things happen naturally when someone feels a strong connection. He may be acting distant with his words, but his body language quietly gives him away. Another strong sign is how attentive he becomes to little details. He notices when you change something about your appearance, remembers small preferences, or picks up on your moods. A man who isn't interested won't invest that level of awareness, but a man who's hooked absorbs these details without effort because his attention is naturally drawn to you. Even when he tries to play it cool, his focus is too strong to hide. You might also catch him fidgeting, playing with his hands, or adjusting his clothes when you're near. These nervous signals show he's hyper-aware of your presence. His body reacts because being around you stirs emotions he can't completely control. He may want to appear calm and distant, but his physical responses tell a different story. What makes this so powerful is that these signals usually aren't intentional. He doesn't plan them, he doesn't calculate them. They slip out because of the way he feels. That's why noticing his body language is one of the most reliable ways to know he's hooked. His words might create doubt, but his body tells the truth. And when his eyes linger, when he unconsciously leans closer, when he picks up on the smallest details about you, it's a clear sign that no matter how distant he tries to act, you've already taken up space in his head. When a man is hooked but acting distant, one of the most revealing signs is that he tests the emotional safety of the connection before allowing himself to fully open up. This usually shows up in small, subtle behaviors that might feel confusing if you don't recognize what's happening. He'll pull back slightly to see how you respond. Will you panic and chase him, or will you remain calm and grounded? For him, this is a way of figuring out whether being vulnerable with you is safe. Men who are drawn deeply often carry the fear of losing control or being hurt, so they create little tests, not to play games, but to reassure themselves that the bond won't overwhelm or betray them. You might notice he delays replying to a message, not because he doesn't want to talk, but because he wants to see if you'll grow anxious without immediate reassurance. He could suddenly become less available, not because he doesn't want your company, but because he's checking whether you respect his space or if you'll pressure him. To him, these small retreats aren't rejection, they're experiments. He's asking himself silently, can I trust her with my feelings? Can I let my guard down here? When a man is truly uninterested, he won't care about testing emotional safety. He'll simply drift away without thought. But when he's hooked, the stakes feel higher. He doesn't want to risk getting attached only to be met with judgment, manipulation, or rejection. That's why he pulls back just enough to measure how you handle it. If you stay balanced and consistent, he interprets that as security. If you react with pressure or panic, he may retreat further. At the heart of this behavior is his vulnerability. The distance isn't because you don't matter, it's because you matter more than he expected. And when someone matters, the fear of losing them or getting hurt grows stronger. His retreat is his shield, but his return is his proof. Each time he pulls back and comes back again, it shows he's not walking away. He's testing whether it's safe to move closer. That back and forth is one of the clearest signs you're in his head, because if you weren't, he wouldn't care enough to test the connection in the first place. When a man is hooked but seems distant, one of the most misunderstood signals is that his withdrawal is not always rejection. More often, it's a reflection of the inner battle he's fighting between desire and vulnerability. When he pulls back, it's easy to assume he's losing interest or moving on, but in many cases, the truth is the opposite. His distance is a form of self-protection because caring deeply exposes him to the possibility of hurt. The stronger his feelings grow, the more he feels the need to guard himself, which is why the more you matter, the more likely he is to retreat at times. Think about it like this: the closer someone gets to his heart, the more risk he feels. With casual connections, he can be relaxed, open, even carefree, because there's nothing to lose. But with you, when you're in his head and taking up real emotional space, he doesn't have that safety net. He knows that if you walked away, it would sting. So instead of leaning fully into those emotions, he steps back to test whether he can handle the weight of them. That withdrawal isn't about not caring, it's about caring too much. You'll often notice that even in his distant phases, he doesn't disappear completely. He keeps a thread of connection, whether it's a quick check-in, a social media interaction, or finding excuses to stay in your orbit. That's because his mind doesn't allow him to let go. He wants space to manage his feelings, but he can't cut you out because you've already become important to him. A man who isn't hooked will leave without hesitation. A man who is hooked will create distance, but he'll always circle back. This is why it's so important not to take his distance at face value. His retreat isn't a dismissal of your value, it's a reflection of his fear of vulnerability. He may not have the words to admit it, but his behavior shows the struggle. He wants closeness, but closeness feels risky. He craves connection, but connection exposes him. That inner conflict is what makes him act distant, yet it's also the clearest proof that you're in his head. If he truly didn't care, he wouldn't feel the need to protect himself at all. His distance is not rejection, it's evidence of how deeply you've already gotten to him. So here's the truth. When a man acts distant, it's tempting to assume he doesn't care, that he's pulling away because you don't matter to him. But in reality, distance often hides the opposite. It hides the fact that you've gotten under his skin, that you've touched a part of him he can't easily control. His inconsistency, his quiet ways of staying connected, his body language that slips, the way he shows up when it matters, and even the little tests he creates. These aren't signs of indifference. They're signs of a man wrestling with feelings stronger than he's ready to admit. The key is not to panic in the face of his withdrawal, but to recognize it for what it is. Proof that